Chapter 8. The Sirens. Part 4 of 4. Buttercup ascended the first flight of stairs, firing all the while. Briars stood at her side, firing his carbine at the handful of firearm-wielding Mayans that started to creep in behind the fodder. The cult didn't have a military industry to produce weapons and ammunition. The infrastructure to support it simply wasn't there. Whatever they stole from stockpiles and stores were only given to the ponies that could use them and the intelligent Mayans. The fodder, however, was unending as they arrived en masse from all directions. BC. Get up here. Buttercup glanced behind her to see Briars leaning around the bend in the stairs urging her to climb up. Seeing that there were no more survivors on the first or second floor, she knew it was time to leave. A Mayan was too close for comfort and she brought her weapon to bear, but the AA-12 clicked dry as the zealot trying to knife her lunged for her leg. Using her better elevation thanks to the stairs, she delivered a kick that smashed the zealot's face in and sent him careening into three more behind him. A few of the smarter Mayans used the opening to fire upon her and scored a few hits on her torso and arms and helmet. Fortunately, her Kevlar proved too strong for the pistol fire and the hits only pissed her off even more. Briars picked off the shooters, but not before a fourth Mayan took aim with a fallen paratrooper's rifle and fired a 3-round burst at the brawler who was in the middle of kicking another zealot in the side of the head. A bullet punched through the gap between her armor at her chest and thigh, the next smashed through her left kidney while the third grazed her leg. Buttercup cursed a number of things as she fell at the top of the steps. Briars bit down on the pin of his last grenade and tossed it lightly to land on the bottom of the stairs while pulling his wounded squad mate out of the line of fire and behind the concrete pillar that separated the flights of stairs. "You're not dying on me that easy, BC." Buttercup only managed to hiss in agony as he hefted her on his shoulders following the loud crump of his grenade, buying them a few seconds. Smithers' voice shouted in Briars' earpiece. "Briars, Farley, get to the roof. Veers, Fang, cover their asses. Evac is in 30. Briars carried Buttercup's bleeding form up 3 flights of stairs and met Myers and Fang halfway up as the 2 soldiers kept the zealots and the odd Pegasus at bay. Buttercup heard the sound of 4 helicopters closing in while rockets from the Vipers destroyed 1 Abrams and sent the other scurrying behind a hill for cover. The side-mounted autocannons of the Black Hawks raked the ground to discourage any ground-bound retaliation. At least from the ponies, the intelligent Mayans however did not fear death and kept firing at the 4 helicopters, drawing the attention of the 2 Vipers. Briars and Buttercup boarded the first Black Hawk along with 5 other survivors. The second helicopter touched down shortly after the first took to the air again to provide cover for them. The third Abrams scooted out from behind the hill and fired an explosive round at the stationary helicopter right as the last of the 82nd boarded. The shot punched through the tail and detonated in the middle of the passenger section, killing everyone on board. Seeking revenge on its fallen protectee, one of the Vipers climbed in the air to rob the tank of its cover and fired a barrage of rockets at the Abrams. Yet vengeance was denied as the tank used an old motel for impromptu cover. The pilot wasn't so easily evaded and circled around to get a clear line of sight on the target. The tank commander hefted a stinger and waited for the Viper to come around to attack. The pilot, however, was no fool and already had his flares at the ready and was prepared to avoid a dumb-fired rocket. The tank commander never got a chance to fire at all as the Viper shot first and obliterated the tank with a volley of rockets. With his revenge satisfied, the Viper tore after the remaining Black Hawk to protect its last charge. The 82nd's medic tended to Buttercup's wounds while aboard the helicopter. The heavy weapons expert hadn't seen the other Black Hawk go down, but she could see the pained looks on her squad mates that very few of them survived. All of them had suffered not just physical injury, nor mental ones from the loss of their brethren, but also at the hands of the Sirens who nearly broke the minds of the few survivors. She glanced at Smithers, who was doing a good job at keeping a strong front, but Buttercup knew the NCO was hurting just as much as the rest of them. That had damned well better be worth the cost. The distraction worked as intended and Alexia's group did not encounter a single hostile along the way as they all raced to join the firefight to the south. Alexia heard that pleasant sound pop in again, and it didn't leave again until all 7 of them crouched on the far side of the road where Berry College's main entrance presided. From their position behind a long wooden fence that belonged to the abandoned ranch behind them, there was practically no sign that there was a college at all except for the sign clearly marking the 2-lane road, which had both lanes divided by a grassy median, as the entrance. Similar wooden fences enclosed the ranch. Those fences were little more than a post with 3 long brown wooden beams that was more for aesthetics than to actually deter human passage. The grasslands between the highway servicing the college and the campus itself was not overgrown thanks to the large herd of cows that huddled together on the left side of the entry road so as to keep warm during the storm. Like many older-styled southern estates, the campus itself was not visible from the highway thanks to both the long service road and the dense woods that sat beyond the pasture land. There was a newly cut dirt road between the edge of the woods and the ground-level highway so road traffic could bypass the lengthy service road. Carter was at the front of the pack as he led them behind the fence of a ranch directly across the highway from Berry College. He turned around to study everyone's faces. They don't look it, but first time getting hit by a siren is never easy. We should take a 6-minute breather. Get whatever images or after effects of the visions out of your system. Snake wasn't too happy about that and growled angrily at the federal agent. Both men were panting at the dead run from the billboard, but had the endurance to keep going for another 20 miles if need be. My buddy's dying back there to give us time to infiltrate the college and you want us to just dick around. Carter met his challenge and stepped up to be nose to nose with the soldier. Rain fell over his face and over his eyes, but he did not blink no matter how much it stung him. We just got hit by something new, and I've had agents crack from just hearing the sirens once. We stay for 6 minutes to make sure there's nothing broken upstairs. Snake didn't want to rest. He didn't want to take a load off, and most certainly didn't want to waste the time his brothers in arms were dying to give them. He was inches from acting on that when Loie clapped a restraining hand on his shoulder. Loie looked ill, and not just from the sprinting. I feel you, man, you know I do. But if those bitches put a time bomb in our heads I'd rather explode here, rather than me going crazy at a bad time. Snake was still resistant to the idea of twiddling his thumbs. I don't see what 6 minutes is going to do for that sort of thing, if a mental time bomb is even there. His scowl deepened at the prospect of cracking under something he had no defense against. Conrad strode up to the arguing trio. We need the time to observe the entrance anyway. There's a good 200 yards of open field between here and the tree line on the far side. It may be clear of hostiles at the moment, but we need at least some time to make sure it'll stay that way. That got Snake to calm down enough to compromise. 4 minutes. Then we go. Carter didn't like it. Standard procedure after surviving a siren was to return to base camp and let the afflicted recover from the intense mental strain. That normally took several hours. Dumb bastard needs to learn patience. With the decision made to take a short break, Alexia nodded quietly to her mates and they spread out to take advantage of the respite next to the fence that ran parallel to the highway. The pale yellow pony rested next to a tree that grew adjacent to the fence so she could have some reprieve from the relentless downpour of chilling rain. She didn't want to get mud on her clothes so she opted to lean against a fence post while her mates did the same nearby. The mare eyed the elaborate, yet low to the ground, red brick sign displaying the college's name. You know, she said mostly to Loki who was trying her best to ignore the darkened pink strands of hair hanging over her face. The grey wax was irritating the earth pony's eyes and she raised a muddy boot to wipe the stains away, but the idea of having mud on her face was less appealing so she attempted to clear her vision with a fetlock. I almost went to Berry before I found out it wasn't the best place for pre-med. But when did a liberal arts college change to having a genetics lab? Conrad was only half listening from his perch on top of the fence. A rusting tractor between him and the road allowed him to rest there without worrying about being spotted. The Pegasus's elevation was barely 3 feet off the ground, but it made him feel better regardless. Maybe they wanted to branch out. Gather a wider student body or something. Anderson's left ear flicked in contemplation. Either that, or the Mayans took the place over before they overran the town. Not participating in the conversation, Loki glanced at the humans. The two paratroopers were silently leaning against a tree. Snake was trying to ignore the memory of the Sirens' vision of his girlfriend back home as he scanned the highway and service roads into the college. Carter stood alone, as he made sure no hostiles were bunkered in the ranch behind them. He ignored the freezing rain as he used a personal technique of his to recover from the Sirens' influence. It was a form of mental discipline that he had not shared with anyone, mostly out of the belief that others could not possibly replicate it. The Green Mare didn't pay attention to Crimson and Conrad's conversation as the normally jovial mare tried to repair the damage the Sirens inflicted by ripping open an old wound that had never truly healed. "Gwen. You may not recognize me anymore, but I'm still me in a way. I try to help realize your dream of making others happy. That's what you wanted out of life, wasn't it? Make others smile?" A few tears were lost in the rain as she remembered the only blood relative that loved her back. "I know I let your. She couldn't bear to say the word and decided it was best to leave it unsaid. Twist that in the past. Memories of the torment she inflicted on Conrad and various people she wronged before and after growing fur. She never thought what she did was wrong at the time, and that her prank victims were being overly sensitive. Loki's time with Alexia and the herd slowly altered her view on the world, and her past actions. "But I'm doing it correct now though, right?" Her ears fell flat and she masked her renewed grief as just hanging her head to rest so Crimson and Conrad would leave her be. "Who am I kidding? If I wanted others to laugh I should have been a comedian, not a hacker or a spook. Freya is dead, long before she grew fur and a tail. She died when that bastard killed you back in San Fran. But maybe as Loki, I can bring some smiles to those who need it most. It took 3 people giving me a chance to be loved again to do it though. I can't stand before a crowd and make them laugh like I know you would have. But maybe I can keep that fire of laughter in Mage's heart. She'll be our legacy, Gwyn. I'll pass your laughter into her so it can make her smile through the ages." Loki's ears perked up and she turned to look at the silver mare in question, who looked as if she was dozing while leaning against a tree trunk. A trace of a smile curled the silver mare's lips. "I might have a foal or 2 of my own one day, but Alex's smile will be my real legacy. Our legacy." Alexia was feeling somewhat proud of herself. While she was still somewhat winded from the exertion of fending off the Sirens' attack, the 7-person teleport, and the subsequent dead sprint from the billboard to the old ranch, Toon was a little excited. "Whatever this melody that I keep hearing must be some kind of innate alicorn resistance to mental manipulation. I must have picked up on the incoming sirens early, and that's when this sound started up again." The silver mare had seen a vision of her father, who she had been closest to back when she was human. But unlike some of the others, she could tell right away that it really wasn't him. Sure, his sudden forgiveness of my decision to stay in the herd sounded nice, but his voice was tinny, his image was a little blurry, and I simply had no compulsion to believe that was really him in the slightest. Doesn't make it any less creepy that those red-skinned loonies were able to pull out such intimate memories, but I was still able to resist it easily thanks to that sound. The azure-crowned alicorn couldn't explain why, but she adamantly believed the sound of her worshippers kept her from succumbing to the psychic attack. If she knew the actual source of that pleasing melody that started to fade away from her perception, she would be far less inclined to block out the world and enjoy listening to the sonnet play in her mind. Once it had disappeared completely, Alexia opened her eyes to see Carter and the 2 soldiers were checking their gear while Loie bit off one last bite of a candy bar for some quick calories before stuffing it away as well. Twilight said, "My body will keep changing over the next few centuries or so until I look like a silver and azure version of Celestia, and that's just the cosmetic changes." She glanced down at her forelegs, which were completely concealed behind her waterproof clothing and boots. Nevertheless, she could still imagine seeing her silver fur beneath it. Perhaps this noise is just part of those changes. Maybe my brain is developing something new and this sound is a side effect. Not to mention it's really comforting to listen to. She had to forcibly push the memory aside to focus on the present. Either way, if it keeps me protected from psychic attacks like that, then I need to learn how to control it so it doesn't keep going off and on like this. Shaking her head to clear her thoughts, the princess trotted over to her mates. I hope you all have recovered enough from the sirens. Well enough, Loki replied flatly as she tried to rekindle her usual mirth with fair success. I'm fine, Conrad declared evenly now that his aggression was abating, although I wish my old man had actually been there so I can return the favor I still owe him. Crimson stretched like a cat, but was careful to keep her footing on the wet grass. I'm not going to let imaginary phantoms stop me from doing my job. Lead the way, Alex. As much as she was accustomed to doing just that, she had to give that honor to the local expert, Carter. The federal agent in question assumed Toon had her fellow equines squared away and took one final sweep of the surrounding grasslands to make sure the coast was clear. We make for the trees on the right side of the paved service road. He turned to Alexia. Don't teleport again. We got lucky last time, but I don't want that flash giving us away. She frowned, but agreed with his reasoning. I'll keep that in mind. Without further preamble, Carter jumped the fence and started sprinting at a grueling pace. The rest followed shortly thereafter. None of them knew what they might find beyond those woods. Be it information on the plague, a possible cure, or new horrors. The only real concern dancing in everyone's minds was the same statement just with different wording: this had better be worth it. End chapter 8. The Sirens.